Much, Mr. Bowen. Senator Smith.
Pardon me.
Great.
Senator Smith.
Great, thanks very much, Chair. Excellent. Taking me by surprise. Mr. Bowen, if I could just go back to your comments that you made at the public hearing in regards to the National Commission of Audit. You talked about the importance of fiscal space, I think was the terminology you used. And I might just read a quote to you, which is what you said. It says that you reflected on the IMF report, which talked about, the IMF report I think was called Creating More Fiscal Space in Good Times, and it talked about the European experience and the importance of having a capacity to respond, I think, to international crises. And you said it made the point that a key lesson from the crisis, that's the European crisis, was the desirability of having fiscal space to run larger fiscal deficits when needed. In other words, if there is a need to stimulate the economy, you need to have a basis with which to do that. And just on the basis of that comment and looking at the budget that's just been released by the government, do you think that the new budget does set Australia on the right path for having enough fiscal space in the future should there be an international crisis?
Senator, without commenting on the policies that underlie the budget, as you would appreciate, I am not in a position to do that, but it is clear that the fiscal consolidation that is explicit in the budget will, over time, provide that sort of a buffer.
Excellent. Thanks very much. In other evidence to the National Commission of Audit, you spoke of a report that the PBO had done in regards to the spending profile of the Commonwealth. I'm just trying to find that. You spoke of the spending profile of the government, particularly in areas of health, welfare, and health welfare, I think primarily. And I'm just wondering, would you agree that the measures in the budget, the measures in the most recent budget, are a step in the right direction to help put some of the largest and fastest growing areas of government spending on a more sustainable footing?
Senator, I think it is factually correct to say that the measures that have been taken in both of those areas that you referred to will reduce the impact on the Commonwealth budget over time.
Would you like to elaborate at all? Or?
Well, it's not a matter for me to comment on the appropriateness of individual measures.
Agreed.
I mean, that is a policy decision, but it certainly is a matter of fact that the measures that have been taken in the budget in relation to hospitals and schools, for example, as set out in the budget summary document, will, if fully implemented, help to redress the rapid growth in expenditure that had previously been planned in those areas of activity.
Great, thanks very much. At page 3-30 of budget paper number 1, we have a graph and some description which talks about the structural budget balance.
Yeah.
And if my reading of the budget papers is correct, it does show a strong improvement in the structural budget position of the Commonwealth. And I'm just wondering, have you done anything to update your estimates since the release of the budget?
Senator, no. Our position is that with the inclusion of this structural budget balance analysis in the budget papers, it would be a duplication of effort for us to continue to do that. So we like you, will rely on the Treasury analysis in the budget papers.
Okay, so you'll be using the budget estimates to inform your own calculation and research work.
We will,
Yep. Okay.
yes.
I'm just keen to understand, just continuing from the conversation or the brief comments you've made about fiscal space, if we could reflect a little bit on what would be the risks to the national economy if the new government didn't take any remedial steps like the ones it has taken to correct expenditure in Commonwealth, to correct expenditure, Commonwealth expenditure. You know, what risks might exist to the national economy if there weren't any remedial steps undertaken?
Senator, I think underlying your question is the fact that prior to this budget, the trends in revenue and expenses were diverging. And these divergent trends were structural trends. Accordingly, to rectify the structural imbalance, it is necessary to take structural measures. Now, the Australian economy is an open economy. It is exposed to the international economy, and it does require a buffer against economic shocks. Those shocks can take a number of different forms, from movements, adverse movements in the terms of trade, given that we are a large commodity exporter, and going as far as the extreme shocks that occurred during the recent global financial crisis, which affected the entirety of the financial system, the global financial system, and of course the Australian economy.
Is there anything in the budget papers that suggest that the government cannot reach its reduced budget deficits?
Senator, of course, as you are aware, the budget must be passed by the Parliament, but I have no reason to take exception to the estimates, forecasts and projections that have been put forward.
Or put another way, it is achievable for the government to realise the reductions in budget deficits that are forecast in the budget documents.
Well, as I say, Senator, as a technical exercise, of course. At the end of the day, the outcome of the budget will depend in large measure on the attitude of the Parliament.
Agreed.
Of course.
But putting that aside for the moment, there's nothing in the budget papers that suggests that those deficit reductions are not achievable.
Well, Senator, not having examined every last element of the budget, but I have no reason to doubt as I said, the figures in the budget. Excellent. As presented.
Thanks very much. Just turning briefly, if I may, Chair, to the recent forecasts around the terms of trade and what we've seen in the nominal figures around GDP growth, does that increase the urgency for budget remedies?
Well, it is true that with a downturn in both the terms of trade and nominal GDP, there will, of course, be an impact on revenue, and other things being equal, that would place more pressure on the budget.
and so therefore it would increase the urgency for some budget remedies.
Well, it wouldn't reduce the urgency, and yes, it would place more pressure. As you are aware, while we still have a relatively low debt, because of continuing deficits, that debt has been rising and rising rapidly. So I think it's generally accepted that the trend in fiscal aggregates is of concern.
It's the rate of increase that is the issue that people's attention should be drawn to, not the size. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, the rate of increase, if allowed to go unchecked,
Yes.
would mean that net debt would increase quite rapidly to the point where that fiscal buffer we talk about would not be available.
And when we look at the rate of increase, do you have some comments about how that compares internationally? How we, where does Australia fit in terms of its sort of in terms of other comparative economies in terms of that rate of increase? Are we in the middle? Are we at the end?
Senator, I have seen figures which I don't have with me, but from memory, currently Australia's debt is increasing at the fastest rate of any OECD country.
And is that cause for concern?
Well, certainly, if allowed to continue, it would be.
Thanks, Mr. Bowen. I just wanted to turn briefly, if I might, Chair, to some...
Well, before